everyone. Trooper Terry here, 10th Cavalry, Northern California, Troop G. Want to give you a little information about Buffalo soldiers here this morning. Buffalo soldiers were some of the most courageous soldiers that ever fought or that were ever enlisted in the United States military. They got started in 1866 in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, when the United States government and Congress decided that they needed to have troops on the western frontier, which was beginning to open up after the Civil War. Those soldiers went west in 1867. They went to the Texas Panhandle area and all down by the Texas border. While there, their principal job was to protect and contain Indians on the reservations there. However, their goals were also to protect wagon trains, the railroad being built, stagecoaches, cattle herds, fight off rustlers, as well as revolutionaries from Mexico. Now, the other thing that they had to do while they were there was they had to make sure that the towns and the settlements were protected. And in doing so, sometimes they ran into difficulties because the people in the towns were not particularly fond of them. So when they went into towns, they always had to go in pairs of at least two or more. Buffalo soldiers received the worst equipment, the worst horses, the worst weapons, and they made them work. They were so proficient with their weapons, that's hence the one shot, one kill was, can't get it out.
Go ahead.
But also what they did was they were some of the finest light cavalry in the United States Army. Their horsemanship was well noted because a lot of them were, during the Civil War, they went and lived with the Indians, the Native Americans. They hunted, fished, and learned how to track with these people. So after the war, when they formed the 10th Cavalry, they were able to go there and utilize these skills. And they passed these skills on to each other. So if you learned something, your job was to pass it on to somebody else. So once you died or left the regiment, that skill would not be lost. Now also, they fought Apaches. They actually assisted in the capture of Geronimo. They also, after the Indian Wars, which lasted from 1866 to 1890, they were sent to out west of California, and they became the first National Park Rangers. They went to Yosemite National Forest, and they built Yosemite. They built the park, they built the roads, the bridges, the structures, everything there. Once completing that job, they went to Sequoia National Park, and they became the National Park Rangers there. Now, after doing all that, they spent a brief time up in Maine, where they were park rangers up in the forest up there. I can't recall the name of that national forest up there. Now, they also participated in 1898 in the Spanish-American War in Cuba. In Cuba, now you've all heard of San Juan Hill, Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. Well, you'd be interested to know that Teddy Roosevelt was the last person up San Juan Hill. That Teddy Roosevelt did not take San Juan Hill, that the Buffalo soldiers actually took San Juan Hill. The 10th Cavalry Buffalo soldiers to be exact. When Teddy Roosevelt ordered his troops to charge, they remained standing. The Buffalo soldiers moved forward on line. They had to hold the line, hold the position until he could go back and get his troops. Now, once he got his troops and brought them on line, the Buffalo soldiers continued to move forward, and they took San Juan Hill. After that, Roosevelt said that the Buffalo soldiers were great soldiers, they were hard workers, and he commended them. Now, when he was running for president, he changed his tune. He said they were slackers, and they were generally not good soldiers, and they had to be motivated. But this is a time in the mood of the country, and you have to remember now, the man was a politician. Now, upon the end of the Spanish-American War, Buffalo soldiers also served in World War I. They served in the Philippines. They served in World War II. They served in World War. Buffalo soldiers ceased to exist as a military unit as of 1944, when the president, Harry S. Truman, decided that the United States Army would no longer be segregated and they would be integrated. At that point, Buffalo Soldiers ceased to exist as a unit, and they were integrated into all the small units and other units into the United States military, thus becoming support troops. They became truck drivers in the motor pool, they became mechanics, they became cooks, they became bakers, they became stewards. It wasn't until the 50s that American fighting men were actually placed into integrated units and were able to serve on the front lines. At this point, I need to take a break.
Good day. My name is Trooper William Terrell. I'm the current president of the 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers of Northern California. Today I'd like to give you the brief history of an unsung American hero. His name is Lieutenant Henry Ocean Flipper. Prior to that, I will give you a brief history of the Buffalo Soldiers and their creation. After the Civil War in 1866, Congress enacted legislation creating 6 regiments of black soldiers. They were the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th Infantry Divisions. These regiments consisted of all black soldiers with white officers. For 11 years during this time, there were no black officers, but Henry Ocean Flipper, who graduated in 1877, became the first black graduate from the military academy at West Point. Lieutenant Flipper is an unsung American hero. During his tenure at West Point, Flipper endured ostracization, no socialization with any of the other cadets. Although the instructors did interact with him and assisted him and encouraged him, he had no other interaction with any other troopers during his 4-year term at West Point. In spite of that, he excelled in his academics and did not let this deter him. In 1877, he became the first black graduate of the military academy at West Point. His first duty station was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. There he was given several duties to perform, and he performed each one of these duties with got excellent evaluations from each one of his commanding officers. There was a problem with stagnant water in Fort Sill, and many of the soldiers yearly would get malaria, get sick, and some even died. Flipper was able to design a ditch that would allow the water to retreat and would not stay and be stagnant. They have this ditch called Flipper's Ditch, and it still stands today. Lieutenant Flipper was an excellent horseman and enjoyed horseback riding. He would go riding daily with a young lady who was living there with her parents in Fort Sill. During this time, they enjoyed their horseback riding, and there was never a romantic relationship between the two of them. But some of the other white officers didn't believe this. She had been dating one of the white officers, but when he proposed, she refused his proposal and did not want to marry. Many of the officers blamed this on Flipper, so they set up a trap to catch him and court-martial him. The commanding officer asked Flipper, because he was in charge of the commissary funds, to start storing the funds in his quarters. He was reluctant to do that because he knew some of the other officers had keys to his quarters. He did observe one of the officers milling around his quarters at one point. Subsequently, the commanding officer ordered an emergency audit of the commissary funds. During this audit, it was uncovered that there was $1,400 in funds missing from this. As a result, they decided to court-martial Lieutenant Flipper. There was no evidence of embezzlement because Lieutenant Flipper had returned the funds himself out of his own money, but they decided to court-martial him and found him guilty of conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. Even though the commanding officer had sent a letter to the president asking that the charges be lessened on Lieutenant Flipper and he not be given a dishonorable discharge, they ignored this request and court-martialed him anyway and gave him a dishonorable discharge. Lieutenant Flipper did not let this deter him. He was always a man of conviction and he knew of his innocence. So as a civilian, he became very successful. He became a successful engineer, surveyor, because he spoke many languages. He was an interpreter. He also worked for the Federal Department of Interior. He became a very successful entrepreneur after his military life. He never gave up his fight to get his good name. He never gave up his fight to get his pardon and to get his honorable discharge. In the later parts of 1970, Lieutenant Flipper's dream of getting his name renewed was accomplished. In 1972, his dishonorable discharge was changed to honorable. He was moved to a grave in his hometown and given a burial in full military honors. In 1999, then President Bill Clinton posthumously pardoned Lieutenant Flipper, and he was considered an officer, a gentleman, and an honorably discharged from the United States. Lieutenant Flipper was truly an unsung American hero. Now I'd like you to see a short video clip of Lieutenant Flipper. They honor him each year at West Point. Please enjoy this video. Thank you.
Who?
Who?
Who? Who?
Who?
Who is Henry O. Flipper? Why is there a dinner and an award celebrating his legacy?
Henry O. Flipper was born a slave in Thomasville, Georgia on March 21st, 1856.
After he was freed at the end of the Civil War, Flipper wrote to his Congressman James Freeman in 1873 and requested an appointment to West Point.
After some correspondence, Freeman nominated Flipper, who passed the required examinations and was admitted to West Point on July 1st, 1873.
Flipper persevered through 4 years of hardship at West Point, enduring violence, racial slurs, intimidation, and silencing.
Throughout his 4 years at the academy, no one spoke to Henry O. Flipper, except in the execution of official duties.
Occasionally, when other black cadets were in attendance at the academy, he had roommates, but mostly he roomed alone.
During his first year, he roomed with the first black cadet at West Point, James Webster Smith, who eventually was expelled for failing physics.
During his final year at West Point, Flipper roomed with Johnson C. Whitaker.
In 1880, Whitaker was brutally beaten and left tied to his bed. He was then court-martialed by General Schofield after investigators accused him of doing this all to himself. After much public outcry, his court-martial was overturned, but he was later expelled for failing physics.
Even though Flipper was ostracized at the military academy, he kept his eyes on graduation and endured the poor treatment he received with grace and dignity.
He was not outspoken like Smith and did not raise issues up the chain of command like Whitaker. Flipper felt like the majority of cadets would have treated him with the proper politeness as it befits a gentleman to do, had it not been for the control that the worst of the American population exerted over the rest of the Corps.
On graduation day, his perseverance earned him the grudging respect of his classmates.
Despite the hardships he faced, Flipper excelled in engineering, law, French, and Spanish. He graduated 50th out of 76 in his class.
To put Flipper's time at West Point into perspective, the first black cadets entered West Point in 1870. From 1870 to 1889, 23 black cadets were nominated, 12 were admitted, but only 3 graduated.
Henry O. Flipper was the first in 1877, followed 10 years later by John H. Alexander in 1887 and Charles Young in 1889. Young went on to be the first black man to reach the rank of colonel in the United States Army.
However, black cadets continued to be mistreated well after Flipper's graduation, and the cruel practice of silencing black cadets remained well into the 20th century.
So, why do we remember Henry O. Flipper?
In 1977, the centennial of Flipper's graduation, the Henry O. Flipper Dinner was founded in his honor and is now held annually on the first Thursday of Black History Month.
Each year, the Flipper Award is given to a graduating cadet who demonstrates the highest qualities of leadership, self-discipline, and perseverance in the face of unusual difficulties.
As we look back on Flipper's time at the Academy, we must reflect not only on Flipper's personal bravery, but on the unacceptable treatment he received from the Corps of Cadets.
As members of the Corps today, we must ensure Flipper's time at the Academy be a reminder to never treat a group of people with the hostility and disrespect shown to Flipper and the other early black cadets.
By recognizing and learning from the injustices of our past, let us always emphasize the need to treat everyone with dignity and respect and understand that the Corps belongs to all of us.
The Corps of Cadets is constantly changing and evolving to include new groups of people.
After Flipper became the first black graduate in 1877, Major General Luis Raúl Esteves became the first Puerto Rican cadet accepted and the first Hispanic cadet to graduate from West Point in 1915. He was the first in his class to earn the rank of general.
In 1976, the first class of women was admitted into the Corps of Cadets, and in 1980, 62 women, 2 of them black women, joined the Long Gray Line.
In 2017, the first 2 Sikh cadets entered West Point and were given full religious accommodation to maintain their articles of faith.
All these trailblazers were inspired by the unbreakable character of our first black graduate, Henry O. Flipper.
As our Corps continues to become more diverse, we must remember and celebrate these trailblazers and allow our diversity to strengthen us rather than divide us.
The best way to honor Flipper's legacy is to strive to make every cadet, regardless of race, religion, sexuality, or gender orientation, feel valued and accepted as a contributing member of the Corps of Cadets.
Let Flipper's story be a lesson in inclusion, pushing us all to embrace, include, and engage all those who come to the United States Military Academy.
Okay. Greetings. I am Trooper Bernard Ivy. I'm the Secretary and Chaplain of the Northern California Chapter of the Buffalo Soldiers 10th Cavalry Company G. My purpose today is to give you a brief overview of the military service and some background on the personal life of the second African American graduate of West Point. His name was John Hanks Alexander. Born January 6, 1864, John Hanks Alexander was the 4th of 7 children born in Helena, Arkansas, to former slave parents, James Milo Alexander and Fannie Miller Alexander. Believing education was the key to success, John Hanks Alexander, along with his siblings, graduated from high school, and 3 of them attended Oberlin College in Ohio. Upon hearing about a competitive examination for admission to West Point Military Academy, John Hanks Alexander decided to apply. Alexander was appointed an alternate. However, he made the highest score on the academic part of the examination and was admitted to West Point in May of 1883. At West Point, Alexander continued to excel academically. He was noted for his skills in mathematics and languages and was also a skilled pugilist or boxer. Although he experienced white ostracism at the academy, one professor described Alexander as having character and behavior to admire and to respect. 4 years later, he graduated 32nd in a class of 64. During the graduation ceremony, John Hanks Alexander was commissioned a second lieutenant, and on September 30th, 1887, he reported to the 9th U.S. Cavalry Regiment at Fort Robinson, Nebraska. Alexander may have ranked higher if he had not received a number of demerits for minor infractions, which was prevalent at that time. For example, twice he was reprimanded for skating on the frozen Hudson River, which is in New York, and it was just a common recreational thing that the cadets like to do. Alexander became the only black officer to serve in a command position, because if you remember, these were all black units. However, they were all commanded by white officers. And John Hanks Alexander served the purpose of being the first black officer to be put in a command position over one of the black regiments. In October 1893, Alexander qualified for promotion from the rank of second lieutenant to the rank of first lieutenant at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, after passing a rigorous physical and military examination. On January 6, 1894, Alexander was assigned to Wilberforce University to serve as professor of military science and tactics. Unfortunately, on March 26 of 1894, he died of a heart attack, or apoplexy, the result of excessive cigarette smoking in Springfield, Ohio. He is buried in Exnia, Ohio. On August 15, 1918, the War Department issued General Order 294 in honor of John Hanks Alexander. This order designated that a military installation in Newport News, Virginia, be named Camp Alexander in his honor because of his ability, attainments, energy, and outstanding military performance. I've given you a brief overview of the life of the second African American attendee and graduate of West Point. And I would like to finish it off by saying that there were more African Americans that were accepted into the ranks of West Point who went on to lead exemplary military careers. But these are just the two that we had the subject matter available for today. So from this point, what we'd like for you to do is we have a brief introductory video clip that will encapsulate the Buffalo Soldiers and their assigned duties, as well as a slideshow that will show some of the events that our unit has participated in over the past several years. I hope you'll enjoy the video presentations, and I hope you've enjoyed the presentation of the subject matter that we had at hand. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy it.
After the Civil War, the United States faced the need for a larger peacetime military to occupy the South and protect settlers on the western frontier. In the summer of 1866, July 28th to be exact, the United States Congress passed legislation establishing a peacetime military. Before the legislation was passed, a hotly debated issue concerned the inclusion of African Americans in the regular Army. Some politicians made the then radical suggestion that the Army fully integrate African Americans into its ranks. Other politicians wanted the Army to remain white only. They eventually agreed to maintain the status quo and continue placing African American recruits in segregated units. A provision of the 1866 legislation created 6 regiments of African American troops, 4 infantry and 2 cavalry of approximately 1,000 men each. In August 1866, the 9th and 10th Cavalries were organized. The 9th Cavalry was in Greenville, Louisiana, with most of the original recruits from nearby New Orleans, Louisiana, and Louisville, Kentucky. The 10th Cavalry was at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Many of the recruits in both units were freed slaves from the North. The assigned mission of these African American troops was to escort the Native Americans from their indigenous homelands to designated reservations. The nickname Buffalo Soldier was bestowed on the troops by the Native Americans as a testament to their valor in battle. The buffalo was a sacred animal to the Native Americans, and they would not bestow its name on the soldiers unless they were worthy adversaries, fighting ferociously to the end and living up to their motto, "We can, we will, and ready and forward." The proud acceptance of the name Buffalo Soldier by the African American soldiers was a badge of honor and pride for the troops. The Buffalo Soldiers were sent to the Great Plains along the Rio Grande, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, Colorado, and into the Dakotas. The duties of the 9th and 10th U.S. Cavalries included guarding the mail, escorting and guarding stagecoaches, cattle drives, railroad crews, and surveyors. They built roads and telegraph lines. They mapped and explored, including mapping vast territories in Arizona and New Mexico, even marking watering holes. They played a major part in building the West and making it safe for the westward expansion. In July 1885, the 10th Cavalry moved west into Arizona. After arriving, troops of the regiment were dispersed throughout the area to cover as much territory as possible. These troops were stationed at Whipple Barracks, Fort Grant, Fort Thomas, and Fort Apache. In 1913, the 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers were sent to Fort Huachuca and remained there for almost 20 years. They joined General John J. Pershing in the 1916 expedition into Mexico, and during the World War I, they were assigned the mission of guarding the United States-Mexican border.
Buffalo soldier, dread like a rasta. It was a buffalo soldier in the heart of America, stolen from Africa, brought to America, fighting an arrival, fighting for survival. And he was taken from Africa, brought to America, fighting an arrival, fighting for survival. Said he was a buffalo soldier, dread like a rasta. Buffalo soldier in the heart of America. on ahead, tried into the land. Yeah, yeah. He was a buffalo soldier in the war for America. Buffalo soldier, dreadlock rasta, fighting an arrival, fighting for survival, driven from the mainland to the heart of the Caribbean. Singing, why, yeah, yeah, why, yeah, 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 why, yeah, 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 yeah. Why, yeah, yeah, why, yeah, 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 why, yeah, 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 yeah. Treading through San Juan in the arms of America, heading to Jamaica, the buffalo soldier, fighting an arrival, fighting for survival. Buffalo soldier, dreadlock rasta. Why, yeah, yeah, why, yeah, 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 why, yeah, 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 yeah. Why, yeah, yeah, why, yeah, 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 why, yeah, yeah. Buffalo soldier, dreadlock rasta. It was a buffalo soldier in the heart of America, stolen from Africa, brought to America, fighting an arrival, fighting for survival. I mean it when I analyze the stench. To me it makes a lot of sense. How the dreadlock rasta was a buffalo soldier, and he